Welcome back to the deep dive.
Okay, let's forget the big picture for a minute because today we are really zooming in. We're looking at a specific villain, maybe hiding right now in your home, that seemingly simple PVC reinforced flexible hose connector.
Right, the kind you find under sinks, connecting toilets.
Exactly. And when these fail, it's not just a drip. It can be, a proper soggy disaster under your floorboards.
It sounds almost trivial, doesn't it? A
Yeah.
small pipe. But we're actually digging into a really detailed source here. Notes on Home Improvement, Part 67, apparently.
Mhm.
And we're using it to do a bit of a, forensic failure
A
analysis.
forensic analysis of a leaky pipe. I like it.
Yeah, the mission here isn't just about fixing a leak. It's using this one specific failure as a kind of blueprint. We want to get past the usual DIY guesswork and pull out some real technical understanding about why common fixes sometimes, just don't hold up against chronic stress in home systems.
Right. So this deep dive is definitely for you if you've ever, say, patched something up, felt pretty good about it, only to have it fail again 6 months down the line.
We're using this user's notes on their failing bathroom pipe as our case study, really. It's a fascinating look at the mix of maybe cheap components, persistent stress, the hidden kind, and, let's be honest, human nature, procrastination.
Always a factor.
Okay, let's kick off with exactly that, procrastination. It's where all good home improvement sagas seem to begin, right? The source material actually calls this specific plumbing job a long overdue project.
Sound familiar?
What really jumped out at me was the timing. The last note about this particular issue was apparently almost a full year before, back in November of last year. That seems, that's quite a while to know something's not right.
It is, but that gap, that's almost the universal theme of home maintenance, isn't it? Things linger. What's really interesting here, and I think relatable for pretty much everyone listening, is how these issues just sort of sit there until the component itself forces the issue. It reaches its absolute breaking point.
So the pipe itself dictated the schedule.
Exactly. This deterioration, the notes describe it, starting as a weep, then eventually becoming more of a spray. It didn't just nudge the user to finally deal with it. It screamed, now. It turned it from, a line item on a dusty to-do list into an urgent, drop everything kind of repair.
The pipe's slow failure created the urgency the user couldn't quite muster themselves. It's like the system itself eventually forces your hand.
Precisely. And that pattern is really important to notice because when you delay maintenance like that, the fix that you eventually have to do, it's almost always harder, probably more expensive, and definitely comes with more panic than if you'd tackled it proactively.
Yeah, the midnight plumbing emergency is never fun.
Never. The fact that the user was forced back to Part 67 of their notes, that's basically proof the system finally just gave up. Cried uncle, as you said.
Okay, let's move into segment 2, because this is where we see the user try the classic quick fix. The notes mention this initial attempt. The flexible hose connector, it had been externally reinforced. They actually layered wire mesh around it.
Ah, the wire mesh technique.
Yeah, sounds pretty robust, right? Like you're really trying to beef it up.
Yeah.
So why didn't adding all that external strength work?
Well, that's a really common sort of intuitive mistake, isn't it? We tend to fix what we can see. The user probably saw some external movement. Maybe the PVC sheath looked a bit bulged or weak and thought, okay, I need to make the outside stronger.
Right. Contain it.
Yeah. But as the analysis in the source material shows, the real weak points, they were never external. That wire mesh fix, it was kind of doomed from the start because the problem was purely internal.
Oh. So the strong wire mesh was like putting a heavy-duty bandage on a failing internal organ. It looked tough, but didn't address the actual function or lack thereof.
That's a perfect analogy, exactly. You have to look inside these flexible connectors. Generally, you've got, 3 main parts. There's the outer sheath you see, might be PVC like this one, or braided steel sometimes. Then there's the inner tube, the bit that actually carries the water. And crucially, there are the metal connector fittings at each end. Those are usually secured with a rubber gasket or maybe an O-ring to make the seal.
Okay.
The user was basically reinforcing the sheath, but the actual failure points, the notes are clear on this, were all about the integrity of those inner parts.
And the notes identified 2 specific weak spots.
Yes, 2 main vulnerabilities. First, that inner rubber sealed the gasket. That's what makes the connection watertight. And second, the metal connector fitting itself, often brass or maybe nickel-plated. These are the bits really under constant stress.
Okay, so the gasket and the metal fitting. And their failure wasn't just simple wear and tear. The notes mentioned a dual attack. Sounds dramatic.
It kind of is in
Yeah.
plumbing terms. The two primary forces suspected are corrosion and high water pressure. And the key thing is they often work together synergistically.
How so?
Well, think of corrosion as the chemical attack. Minerals in the water, maybe tiny electrical reactions between different metals in your plumbing system, or just the rubber gasket material breaking down chemically over time. All that stuff weakens the structure internally.
Okay, so corrosion creates the weakness.
Exactly. And then high water pressure, that's the mechanical stress, it finds those weak points. It exploits them.
So the corrosion makes a tiny pinhole, or maybe weakens the threads on the fitting, and then the constant high pressure just forces its way through, turning that tiny weakness into a drip, or eventually, like in this case, a spray.
That's spot on. That's precisely the failure mechanism suspected here. And that wire mesh. Designed to resist external bending or maybe getting snagged, it offered zero help against that slow, invisible internal process of corrosion weakening the metal or the gasket.
Right. It couldn't stop the chemical breakdown or the internal pressure.
Not at all. It's a fundamental mismatch. The solution didn't address the root problem.
Yeah.
The user was essentially dealing with chronic internal fatigue, not some kind of external damage.
All right, moving to segment 3. This, I think, is maybe the most revealing insight from these notes. The user found it really perplexing that the leak didn't just persist, it actually got worse, even though the washroom itself is infrequently used. Logically, you'd think, less use equals less wear and tear, right? So what does that infrequent use actually tell us? And maybe more importantly, what's the lesson here for listeners about their own home systems?
Yeah, that detail is the smoking gun, really. It's
Yeah.
the key piece of evidence that helps diagnose the real root cause. We have to understand the difference between dynamic pressure and static pressure in plumbing.
Okay.
Dynamic pressure is what you get when the water's moving, faucets open, toilets flushing, there's flow, there's friction involved. Infrequent use means this pipe wasn't seeing much dynamic pressure stress, not much wear from water actually flowing through it.
Okay, so dynamic is moving water. Static pressure. Is that a pressure just sitting in the pipes all the time, even when everything's turned off?
That's exactly it. Static pressure is the constant, relentless pressure from the municipal supply or maybe your well pump just sitting there in the pipes. It's pushing against every seal, every gasket, every fitting, 247, whether you use the water or not.
So with infrequent use, the pressure wasn't really fluctuating much.
Yeah.
It was just consistently high all the time. That sounds like a constant state of stress on the components.
It absolutely is. If usage is low, the system spends most of its time under that high static pressure. And static pressure causes this slow, sustained mechanical creep and fatigue on the vulnerable bits, especially that rubber gasket and the metal threads of the connector.
Like leaving a weight on something weak for a long time.
Exactly like that. Think of putting a heavy book on a weak shelf and just leaving it there.
Wow.
It's the constant load, not necessarily opening and closing the tap rapidly, that causes the breakdown in this scenario. The fact the leak kept going and got worse strongly points to excessive static water pressure being the real persistent enemy here. It fatigued those internal parts prematurely.
Wow. Okay, that raises a really practical question then for anyone listening. If this specific pipe failed because of chronic high static pressure, what should you do about it? How would you even know if your home's static pressure is too high?
Well, that's where this analysis moves from just understanding the failure to, actual prevention. We have to stick to the source material here, but this failure, it's like a flashing red light. It warns you about the hidden danger of high static pressure in general.
Right.
In many areas, water pressure can vary quite a bit. It depends on how close you are to the main lines, if there are booster pumps in the area. The fact this cheap connector failed like this suggests there might be a broader chronic pressure issue in that house. Maybe a pressure regulator is missing, or maybe it's failed. That's something that needs checking.
So the failure of this one little connector could actually be a symptom of a much bigger system-wide problem, a problem that could be stressing out other potentially much more expensive components.
Absolutely. Your water heater, other pipes, appliance connections, they're all under that same static pressure. Once you identify that dual attack, corrosion weakening things, high static pressure exploiting it, the conclusion the source material came to, it was really unavoidable.
Which was?
Replacing the entire pipe assembly was the only safe bet. You just can't trust the other parts of that specific connector assembly once you know it's been subjected to that kind of chronic overstress. Better safe than sorry.
Makes sense. And then there's that lovely little practical detail that brings this whole technical discussion right back down to earth, the mention of the specific tool needed. The yellow plastic wrench.
Ah, yes, the yellow wrench. It's a fantastic detail, isn't it? Because it perfectly highlights that knowing why something failed is great, but it's kind of useless if you can't actually fix it
So
properly.
why that wrench specifically? What's special about it?
Well, that type of wrench is often designed specifically for plastic plating fittings like the nuts on PVC or PEX connectors. Plastic needs a different touch than metal. You need a good grip, especially in tight spaces like under a sink, which the notes mentioned was the case here, a challenging angle. But you absolutely cannot over-tighten plastic fittings. You'll crack the threads or you'll deform the fitting, and you'll immediately stress the new gasket you just put in.
Ah, so you could basically set up the new part to fail right away.
Precisely. That yellow plastic wrench is designed to fit those plastic nuts properly, lets you get things snug and watertight, but without applying the kind of crushing force a metal wrench might, especially in an awkward spot. It connects the theory, understanding the failure, directly to the practice, executing the repair successfully. It's the difference between fixing it right and just setting yourself up to repeat the whole leaky mess again down the road with a brand new part.
Wow. Okay, what a detailed look at just one small component failure. So to quickly summarize the core lesson we've pulled from part 67 of these home improvement notes, trying external fixes like slapping on some wire mesh is basically useless when the real problem is internal weakness.
Right. The gasket, the metal fitting.
Dot combined with an unseen stress. And in this case, that hidden stress was relentless, high static water pressure just sitting there day in, day out.
Yeah, and if we zoom back out for a second, connect this to the bigger picture, this whole analysis is a really potent reminder, I think. We need to look beyond just how often we use things. The real stress in your home systems might be chronic, constant, low-level pressure, not just acute use.
Mhm.
This pipe failure, driven by that unseen pressure, it should really prompt you, the listener, to think, what else in my house is constantly under static pressure? You know, your hot water heater tank, your water filter canisters, even the little supply lines going to your ice maker or dishwasher.
We tend to inspect the things we actively operate, but maybe not the things that are just sitting there holding the line, literally.
Exactly. That's the final thought to maybe leave you with. What's the unseen pressure in your own systems? Could slow corrosion be quietly eating away at joints somewhere, while constant, maybe slightly too high, water pressure is just waiting to exploit every tiny flaw?
Go beyond just fixing the visible leaks.
Right. Consider that critical link between how often you use something and the underlying, maybe hidden structural stress it endures constantly. Are you just fighting symptoms, replacing failed parts one by one, when the real culprit is systemic pressure? That's the kind of sneaky chronic failure that often doesn't make itself known until, well, until you've got that soggy disaster already unfolding. Something to think about.